sexuality prior to marriage, the taboo around divorce, all of the taboo around out-of-wedlock birth, the ideal of celibacy in the priesthood, all of that is just a diabolical machine of needless sexual conflict and misery.
Diabolical? Also needless? What? No. It is not needless to make sure that you're married before you have kids. You want to know how I know that?
Let's just figure out if we can determine why God might care if you masturbate, right? So let's suppose that we have a story, a heuristic of some kind that stands in for something. And the story is God is watching. He sees you always. He doesn't want you masturbating, so don't you dare. What happens?
What happens?
Yeah.
Well...
Good old, yeah, that's awesome. I think I'm going to say what I think happens. I think people masturbate less, probably. I think if that heuristic is out there, people do it less. And what happens as a result of that is people are more incentivized to go out and interact in the real world, and integrate with real, sexual partners, which makes it more likely that you will start families and become more responsible and truly good, as opposed to being hedonistic in a non-societally useful way. I think that's what happens. I think that's kind of the idea. But let's see what Sam Harris thinks.
It's a rather ineffectual idea. Yeah. Well, I mean,
you don't think that story prevented lots of people from masturbating?
Well, no, but I think the reality was that you had people masturbating and feeling terrible about it, and you had a whole layer of sexual neurosis that got grafted onto human psychology unnecessarily.
Okay,
I mean, Christianity has a certain typology of sexual hang-uppery, which the tantrics don't have.
Well, that's not really an answer to the question. It's funny because of the topic. It's inherently funny, but that's not really an answer to the question, Sam. You can call it a neurosis or hang-ups if you want, but I just described the social utility, and that was kind of the question is what happens as a result? Is it socially useful or not socially useful? And didn't really answer that question. Maybe I'll get there.
So if I understand you correctly, you are agreeing that a certain number of people will have masturbated.
Some of them joined the priesthood and raped little boys. I mean, that's all of a piece.
Go there.
Yeah, that's kind of whataboutism, man. That's very much not the point.
Stick with the topic. So a certain number of people will have masturbated. They will have thought.
Honestly, it's the same topic. I mean, the taboos around masturbation, the taboos around sexuality prior to marriage, the taboo around divorce, all of the taboo around out-of-wedlock birth, the ideal of celibacy in the priesthood, all of that.
Those things should, he just listed 4 things that are wildly different and are completely different discussions. I would say number 1, in case you guys didn't know this, sexual assault of minors happens by percentage, per capita, I believe, happens way more in public schools than it does in churches. And I mean way more. The stat's not off the top of my head. If I'm wrong, fact check me in the comments, but I would be willing to bet $200. I'm not betting that in case you guys debunk me, but I would be willing to, if any of you were in person. So that's number 1, so just keep things in perspective. But priest celibacy in terms of what that does to somebody's psyche versus not having kids until you're married and committed to somebody are things that will have wildly different effects on your psyche, and also things that have wildly different levels of social utility. Lumping these together is very weird because he's lumping them together under the umbrella of religious restrictions on sexual morality, but the reasons for the different things under that umbrella are so wildly different that it's really weird to lump them together the way he's trying to do here.
The taboo around divorce, all of the taboo around out-of-wedlock birth, the ideal of celibacy in the priesthood, all of that is just a diabolical machine of needless sexual conflict and misery.
Diabolical? Also needless? What? No. it is not needless to make sure that you're married before you have kids. You want to know how I know that? Because fatherlessness is the number one predictor of intergenerational poverty and like 40 other horrific things. Okay? Having both parents in the home is not societally needless, and a good way to ensure that is to make sure that you're married before you have a kid. The 3 rules to follow to avoid being impoverished in America, these are like very good rules, is graduate high school, have a job, and don't have a kid before you're married. Those are the 3. One of them is a big one. Sam Harris calling that needless and diabolical is insane. And divorce is kind of for the same reason, and it depends on your reasoning for divorce. There's a very interesting conversation there. There are some reasons that are okay, that are good. There are a lot of reasons for divorce that are not good, and it comes from just not taking marriage seriously enough, unfortunately. Regardless, even if like you don't have the super traditional view on this, calling them needless and diabolical is insane. You can have an argument about celibacy in the priesthood maybe, but like divorce, no kids before marriage, kind of try to avoid divorce, like, yeah, that's an insane take by Sam Harris right there. That's an out of your mind kind of take.
Hold on.
But yes, okay.
You have to take diabolical out of there.
How's the whole flood of pornography thing working out for you?
Great.
So real. It's so real. Pornography is very bad for you. It's very bad for a lot of people. It's probably very bad for you. If it's not bad for you now, it probably will be bad for you eventually. We might do a video on this, maybe something a little more long form. I couldn't do it the justice that other people have, but I might take a stab at it if you guys want it, so let me know.
I will grant you that there is some interpretation that takes supernatural principles and magic and otherworldliness out of the equation here that gets you some wisdom in the heuristic. Yes, if you're masturbating all the time, you're not satisfying your monogamous relationship with your wife or husband.
We don't even need to go there. Let's just...
He still hasn't answered the question. Yeah, you're right. There probably is some wisdom in that heuristic, and that's the wisdom that people would act out when exposed to said heuristic. He still hasn't talked about what people would act out. Why not? Maybe because it would be a good effect. So what he's doing is he's avoiding the question and talking about all of the literal problems, and then also having absolutely out of your mind takes about like how kids out of wedlock being a bad thing is like diabolical and needless. It's insane thing to say. It's the most insane thing I've ever heard Sam Harris say ever. Absurd. But notice he still isn't answering the question.
You're not procreating, and
Let's
want
just
children.
agree that
Yes.
a certain amount of masturbation...
Birth rates are below replacement rates. We want kids, actually. It's a problem, especially in the Western world. I mean, it's really all developed nations. They tend to do this, and it's partially due because people are getting richer and they have more options, and it's also partially a cultural shift that comes along with that economic development. We need to reorient on that for sure.
was prevented by that story, which made people fear the consequence of them engaging in it, which would result in, I'm pretty sure, less masturbation, which means that in seeking a release, which we are physiologically programmed to seek, one might end up looking in a more urgent fashion for a mate.
Right. So
right?
It's are we going to enforce monogamy? Is that
no? So look, I'm trying to take you somewhere. I think there is a way that we can rescue some important part of what both of you are saying that can now be reconciled, and then there's a bitter pill for each of you. I mean, that's just...
I like this. I like Bret Weinstein feels like a marriage counselor in this conversation. I love it. It's like, I'm gonna save what's good about both of you, and then I'm gonna make you both do something that you don't like. It's very, very nice, very humorous. He was one of the better... I mean, actually, you know what? All the moderators were good. I love Douglas Murray, too. But Douglas Murray kind of felt like a third debater in terms of the clips I've reviewed so far. And Bret is really being, like, playing marriage counselor / moderator. So it's kind of... it's nice. It's fun.